Hey guys, welcome back for more tutorials. My name is Magnet, and let's talk about using Mutalisks in Zerg versus Protoss. We actually have a lot to talk about in this video, so this video could run a little bit long, so I thought you should be prepared for stuff like that. But most importantly, we want to talk about when to start using Mutalisks as far as when it's safe to transition into them. When to stop using them is perhaps even more important, because if the Protoss can start to really heavily counter your Mutalisk flock and you just keep making more and more, that's a lot of ways that Zergs die with it. Also, we need to talk about the micro with them, and of course the support, and to a much larger extent the transitions and stuff behind them, which is kind of point 2 and 3 mixed together. But let's not waste any time and let's jump into this game. This is going to be kind of a long video, especially because this first replay is really long, but we won't watch the entire thing. And this is going to be a really good classic example of good Mutalisk play in this matchup. As a whole, the Mutalisks are meant to kind of keep Protoss pinned in their base while you take the entire map. That's the whole idea behind Mutalisk builds a large majority of the time. Very rarely you can just win the game with your first few Mutalisks, but you shouldn't be expecting that. And the reasoning is that the Mutalisks are so fast, they can kill off probes so easily back here, that if you force the Protoss to stay in their base the entire game, then you're never going to experience any threats back at home. And if you can get the entire map mining as far as gas, then any transition you want is available, whether it's ultras or swarm hosts or infestors or whatever else you want to mix in there. It's just totally up to you. So basically we're going to kind of skim over most of this game because we're going to wait until the Mutalisks start to become a real factor. All Nurchio is just doing is very standard scouting stuff, just making sure nothing too weird is coming out, like a big gateway all-in or something. Going to grab his lair right now about 7:20. Pretty standard time, not too fast, not too late. He does know there's a Stargate, so he should have spores up here, so this is going to be a little bit annoying, but fairly inconsequential to what we're going to be talking about. Behind this, Void Ray starting up, third base starting up, and once you've verified that the third base is started is really when you can start your Mutalisks. That does have some exceptions. You need to know what tech it is. If it's Stargate and a third base, you can basically do whatever you want against Protoss. They're going to be very slow about getting out on the map if they open Stargate. Same goes with just a Robo. If they're just making like Colossus or Immortals or something, then they're going to be sitting here for quite a while, and Mutalisks are perfect against a Colossus or Immortal type of play. The only thing you should really be worried about is a lot of Blink Stalker timings. Those can come out fairly quickly on 3 bases, so that's the one instance where I'd be a little bit careful. So Mutalisks are definitely very good against really a lot of slower Stargate openers, especially ones that take faster third bases. And they're especially very good against robo plays, considering it's going to take them a long time to switch into what they need against the Mutalisk play. So, Nurchio just hanging out back here. He needs to verify that there's a third base on the way. He can do that basically at any point if he just walks a Zergling over there. He's just going for Hydras, which is a really nice safety tech, and I really want to talk about this because this is one of the best ways to get into Mutas, and that is if you start up Hydralisks, you can hit a little bit of an attack window here and see what you can get done and kind of make them believe that you're going to stay on Hydra. So they might go Colossus to counter your Hydralisk, for example. And that's a great way to make them think that, oh, he's just going to play Hydralisk for this game, and I'm just going to counter it with Colossus or Storm or whatever, and then you can switch in a Muto right behind it. And those switches can be really, really brutal for a Protoss to deal with if you do it the right way. Nurchio, though, he just showed him the Hydralisk den. He's being a little bit cute about this, trying to make him think that this still is a Hydra attack, but he doesn't quite know for sure. So he's just grabbing Blink, and while Blink can be okay against Mutalisk plays, it definitely will only be for prevention. It won't usually be a tech that's really going to get the Protoss a big advantage. So Nurchio just going ahead and throwing down the Spire here. He has been saving up all his gas, so he can start up as many Mutalisks as he wants. And this is going to be where you want to get. You want to get to a point where the Protoss basically has to stay in their base for a long time. Otherwise, you're going to get into a base trade scenario, and Mutaling is one of the best base trading types of compositions. So he's got his Mutalisks coming out now, and look at MC's army right now. It's just Stalkers, Sentry. These Stalkers do have Blink, by the way. So he's going to have a hard time kind of keeping track of these Mutalisks, but he's actually going to do a pretty good job with the Blink. But let's note, this is about as far out on the map as MC's army is going to get for probably about the next 10 minutes, assuming Nurchio can do this right. And your targets with the Mutalisks, first and foremost, the easiest target is just their mineral line. So kill as many probes as you can. But secondly, if you can ever kill Stargates or unpower them, that's going to really slow their transition down into Phoenix. And Phoenix is really the only long-term solution to good Mutalisk play. So that's definitely what Nergio wants to target. So he's going to come in here, try to target down some probes, do his best there. Already killing a handful, and notice the MC has to be like, I have to come all the way back and deal with this. This is so annoying. And he can blink here, he can blink there. Once they've tried to blink at you is when you can move. And notice that once the Stalker's blink is on cooldown, now they're not so mobile. They have to walk all the way around here and walk back to another point. And typically with these Mutalisks, you just want to bounce in between bases as much as you can and try to just kill the Protoss where they're not sitting their army. So this is going to be a constant thing here. And now you have to start thinking about, what's my transition? Because eventually they're going to start adding in Phoenix if they want to counter this in more of the long term. At least most players will. The players that typically don't are usually the ones that die because they can't deal with the Mutalisks. And of course it's on the condition that the Mutalisk player can keep these alive for as long as possible and keep them dealing damage for as long as possible while doing everything they should be doing back at home. So, okay, now you've gotten yourself into this situation. The Stalkers are back at the base, and you know that that's basically all he has is Stalkers. And there's not a whole lot of other tech because you should have seen basically his entire base by now. So he knows pretty much everything that's going on. He could have even seen that that's a robo. Even if it was a second Stargate, he still has plenty of time. But the whole point is that MC's decisions right now are either I need to chase after these Mutalisks or I need to just flat out base trade. And if he does just flat out base trade, then you can start to see him coming across your creep. You can throw down a whole bunch of spine crawlers, maybe make some Zerglings. If you have a Roach Horn or a Hydralisk Den done, you can mix those in as well and just bring your Mutalisks home and try to deal with it that way. Or you can just sit them in your base and just try to base trade them and realize that you have a much more mobile unit composition that will eventually win over time. But the key here is that if you can contain the Protoss for long enough, you can just take bases all around the map pretty much willy-nilly, because if the Protoss can't leave their base, then yours won't be under attack. So now that he's gotten to this stage, he can just continue to be very annoying back and forth. His whole goal, once again, here is just to keep the Mutalisks here for as long as possible. You can try to pick off valuable targets, such as stray Void Rays, maybe stray little packs of Stalkers of like 3 or 4 are very good targets as well. And eventually you're going to have to start adding in support for these. And you usually only want to start adding in support once they start to show Phoenix. That's when you want to decide, is my support going to be Infestors? Am I going to try and fungal the Phoenix and lock him down so I can kill him? Is it going to be Corruptors so I can just push the Phoenix away and the Phoenix really can't fight very well against that? Or am I going to switch into Hydra, which Phoenix do pretty poorly against Hydra? Or am I going to switch into Ultralisks, which are very rigid, kind of a sledgehammer type of transition, because the Phoenix can't do anything to Ultralisks. But you might lose them eventually, so you might have to switch back in one direction or the other. So that's when you need to start thinking about, what's my eventual transition going to be? Because these Mutalisks can't just be everything forever. So this beginning stage is when you definitely want to think about taking extra bases, so he's throwing one down now. And more importantly, if you want to really secure a win with this type of style, you can see he's still being very annoying, even engaging the army just a tad, but not throwing away too many mutas. If you want to continue to cement this style even more, you want to start thinking about adding on a lot of spine crawlers back at home, so that just in case the Protoss decides to start to base trade, they're going to have to base trade into a big wall of spines. And a really popular style, especially on bigger maps, is using all the gas you possibly can for Mutalisks, and then your leftover minerals, you can just spend them on spine crawlers. Some people like to make Zerglings and try to just multi-prong with Zerglings, but ultimately, if you're playing Mutalisks, you're really playing for the longer game, and I think spine crawlers are actually a better solution, especially at lower leagues. You can see him just starting up tons and tons of spine crawlers back at home, just in case MC gets impatient and is just like, alright, screw this, I'm just going to base trade. And let's see if I can just win that way, because LOL, you usually won't be able to win against this many spines. Even more spines going up, and I can't overstate how good this is, once again, just to make extra spines as much as you can and protect all of your mining bases, because that's going to be your key to victory, is just your flat-out economic advantage. And you'll see that whenever he has spare minerals and no spare gas, he just keeps adding on spines. I really like this style. It's very, very smart, especially if they're not going for a lot of Phoenix, which we're seeing here from MC. He's really strictly staying on Blink Stalkers, trying to get Storms, he was trying to get Void Rays earlier, but not so much anymore. Eventually trying to get Archons, and it's really just up to you to keep the Protoss busy. More importantly, keep this Mutaball as healthy as possible. You can see he's at 40 Mutalisks right now, and it's really annoying to deal with. There's no way he can ever really afford to move out on the map. Just keeping them alive is the biggest deal, and he's just cementing his lead with these massive spine crawler walls. Even mixing in some spores and protecting his peripheral bases is also very important. So this game goes on for a long time, 37 minutes, and most of it is just MC getting stuck back here because he can't deal with the Mutos very well. because as soon as the mutas do something and he blinks at them, the mutas can just leave and go somewhere else. So Nerchio isn't doing a lot of quote-unquote damage with this, but he's getting way, way ahead economically with stuff like this. And you can see he's at a point where he's mining on 5 bases worth of gas, if all these were mining like they were supposed to be, which can crank out mutas. His income is just amazing. 1,000 gas a minute, which is basically 10 Mutalisks a minute. That's insane. And then, of course, you can always prepare your transition back at home into whatever you want. It usually should be to try to counter what they're using to respond to your mutas. But you can even see that these mutas are so strong and it takes a Protoss so long to rally somewhere that he can even start to fight the army straight up for quite a while. So he could not be much more ahead in this game right now. Infinity spines, infinity mutas, and there's just no threat to him whatsoever. MC has not left this corner of the map the entire game, and that's just because Nerchio has been so aggressive with his mutas and been right on top of him. So this was a really cool game. I thought we'd just talk about the general approach to Mutalisk builds, but we don't want to watch all 37 minutes because it's more of the same of MC just kind of sitting there, Nerchio making a jillion spines and just kind of winning. So let's take a look at another one, which is Hyun versus Alicia. And this should showcase a lot more of the available entry and exit points as far as Mutalisk builds are concerned. Because it's not like you can usually just say, well, my build's just going to be Mutalisks and whatever, who cares? You definitely do need to have calculated ways to get in and out of them. And this looks like a shorter game, so it looks like Hyun does more of the entry into Mutalisks well, rather than the later stage of tech. So Hyun, of course, spawning here on the right versus Alicia. He's just drone scouting to make sure nothing weird is coming down. It's going to be Hatch first versus Nexus first, so nothing too crazy. And getting his gateway and gases up once again. So all of this, very, very normal stuff. And Hyun at the same time should be looking up to get it onto these 3 bases as soon as possible, so he did take the gold rather than the normal third. He's just going to continue to play this out, and like we've talked about a lot in past videos, you really just want to play this in the sense that you want to produce as many drones as possible while getting the right tech to keep you safe just in case the Protoss moves out. So you want to stay on a fairly low drone count. Going to start his lair, start a Roach Warren. I'm not sure if he actually has Zergling speed or not. Let's check. No, he doesn't. So he's opting to go for Roaches, and now he starts his Zergling speed. But he's just going to defend himself against these types of plays for as long as he can, and then as soon as it's safe to get a little bit greedy, add on greedier techs or more bases or stuff like that, then he can start to do that. As you can see, he is responding properly. His drone count's only at 56, so very normal stuff. And the cool thing with this is that if you produce units around this time anyway, and they decide to take a third base, this is a good point where you can just take your units that you have, whether it's Roachling or Hydraling or whatever, and try to just attack them here and see what you can get. If you can get the base, that's great, but a lot of times you might be targeting down things like Stalkers, Sentries, whatever type of tech that they have out right now. And that can be a good way to springboard you into Mutalisks, because let's say they have like 20 Stalkers, and you trade out well with those 20 Stalkers with your Roachling, and then back at home you had a Spire on the way. All of a sudden the Mutalisks get there, and uh-oh, what do they have to defend against Mutalisks? So that's kind of the whole idea, and this was really pioneered a lot by Dong Regu back in Wings of Liberty. He even still uses the style to this day. It's been around for a long time, and it's really strong. So Hyun's trying to figure out what's going on here. He sees that there's a third base. He's continuing his aggression, and he's continuing to add on units here, and realizing that if I get good trades with these units, then a switch into Mutalisk is probably going to be super strong, especially if they start to think, oh, I need to add on robo units to deal with the Roaches, and that's exactly what we're seeing. So just going to attack up here, see what he can get. Most of the time you won't get great trades with this army. You need to do your best, considering you have the army out, you might as well use it. Just need to limit the amount of units as best as you can. He grabs some sentries, he kills some stalkers, he's trying to get the third base here. I'm not quite sure if he's going to get it all the way. I think he can if he micros his roaches away from the zealots, which he definitely needs to do. And he's not doing it, he's just saying screw that, I'm just going to do it anyway. So he gets the third base. Cool, great trade. Takes a fourth behind it, he's got his Spire on the way, and more importantly, the unit count for Alicia is very low. Only 8 stalkers, 5 sentries. There is blink done, I'm pretty sure. But like we saw in the last game, blink doesn't win the game for you. It just protects your base. So if they're just doing nothing but protecting their base, then you can take the whole map. So adding on some more Roaches and Zerglings, going to try to get one more trade in here before he starts his Mutalisk production. And you can see he's banking some gas, banking some minerals right now, getting ready for that transition. And eventually he's going to try to pick them apart with multi-pronged Zergling and Mutalisk play. So this is a much more aggressive variant of the Mutas rather than a super defensive one like we saw from Nerchio in the previous game. So just kind of congregating here is Hyun, getting ready to attack, trying to find a good angle here. You don't want to just throw everything away. The cool thing is that if you start to fly your Mutalisks in here in the main base, and they're too well defended down here at the bottom, they're going to have to start splitting up their army. Maybe they recall some of it back to their main. Maybe they have to take this part back and they're not looking, and you can get a good surround with the rest of your army. So this is more kind of like a multi-pronging type of just constant harassment Mutalisk style, which is super strong. And it's still very common. Like I said, DRG loves this type of style, just keeping Protoss pinned in their base, but also taking damage at the same time, considering he's not too worried about the later stages of the game. So he's going to trade with some Stalkers in here. Alicia's starting to react as he does blink his Stalkers back into the main. And now that there's nothing here, and there's tons of Roach Ling just waiting to run in there, that's the point where you can decide, alright, his Stalkers have started to report, I can move somewhere else with my Mutalisks, just keep him alive the best I can. Definitely don't want to try and take fights like this. I don't know what he's trying to do. But the secondary part is that these attacking units probably should have already been busy by now, but he's just waiting for longer and longer to start reacting. Now you can see that the reaction here from Alicia is getting a little bit more proper than we saw from MC. Eventually they want to start getting into Phoenix. This is one of those builds where you can just say, well, your long-term solution if it's Phoenix, if I start see you putting down Stargates, then I can just find a good point and attack in here when you don't quite have the tools to deal with everything that I've got. Yeah, this might not win the game, but at the same time it puts him further and further away from countering the Mutalisks. Because you can still fight with these Zerglings, you can still fight with the Roaches. You should have all this stuff kind of left over, or it should have been traded out for Stalkers anyway by some point in the game. So now it's really up to Hyun to think, alright, well, he's going to start counterattacking me because he kind of won that fight a little bit, but I still have opportunity to pick off little groups of units here and there if he's being too sloppy. And I also have the opportunity to just go base trade, and maybe I can pull him back to his base if I can get good enough trades that way. So he's just still trying to pick this apart the best he can, still producing Mutas and a lot of Zerglings, so once again, this is a much more aggressive vein than Nurtio from last game. Just going to continue on this route for quite a little while. There's a little bit of a harassment, counter-harassment, but Mutalisks are good as far as cleaning that up. Alicia dealing some damage here at the third base as well, but of course, if you took Mutalisks, if you went for the Mutalisk route, you should have had basically unprotected bases on your extra ones. And now, eventually, if you get to a good point where you have too much Mutaling and they're just on there with pure Stalkers, this is why Stalkers are not a good solution, because even if you try to get out on the map, you're going to trade poorly against Zerglings, you're going to trade poorly against Spines, and the Mutalisks will basically be untouched because you're too worried about those Zerglings and the Spine Crawlers in the meantime. So this is why these types of builds can't be answered by Stalkers alone, unless you get hit by a really strong timing that you just weren't expecting. So let's note the supply differences right now. Hyun's up by about 80 supply. This game is basically over because the Stalkers just can't cut it when they're out on the map. They're really just offensive tech, and this was just purely Alicia handling this improperly. And more importantly, Hyun doing what he's supposed to with these types of builds. So we can see the game ends in just a little bit. So we'll go ahead and quit out early and don't GG to our people that are in the game because we're observers. So let's take a look at one more really quickly that's a little different. And this is Nurtio versus Showtime. Nurtio being shown here once again, considering he does have quite the propensity with Mutalisks in pretty much every matchup. This one's going to be mostly focused around hitting a really strong Muta-based timing. So this is a lot about scouting out and seeing what's available as far as Mutas. So in the last game, the opener was basically gateways. It was a much faster blink, which is why we didn't see Mutas started right away. And that's what I was talking about, is that if you just go for Mutas right away, that's a situation where they could just attack you with their gateway units and you'll die because you don't have enough to hold it. So this is kind of a situation that goes along those same lines, but it's reacting the right way based upon what he sees in the opener. So Nurtio just going up with a pretty normal build here, grabbing his expansion, grabbing a third as soon as he can. All very normal stuff. You should have seen this a million times by now if you've seen any level of pro Zerg play. Protoss on the other end just getting established on his second base. And here's the Stargate. And Stargate is one of the techs you can definitely open up with Mutas right away. In one form or another. So what you can do is, if they're making a lot of Phoenix, which is common, you can just open up with a Spire, make Corruptors, and go fight the Phoenix on the first place. But secondly, you can follow it up with Mutas so that you can keep them protected. So Showtime just opening up, I think, with just one or two Phoenix. Yeah, and there they are right now. And then he switches into Void Rays. And once Nurtio sees the third base, he knows you only open up with the Stargate. Okay, this is a good situation in which I could play Mutalisk if I wanted to. So, especially if he sees the Void Ray, because Void Rays are awful against Mutalisks. And this is a situation where once you see this third base come down, once you see what type of tech they have coming out, if it's not a lot of gateways and it's not blink and stuff like that, then you're pretty safe to just say, okay, cool, I can go right into Mutalisks and I don't have to worry about any sort of fancy transition with roaches or whatever. So he just goes ahead and does that. There's the Spire right now. By the way, a little bit of a side note, the better you can hide these Spires, the harder it is going to be for a Protoss to figure out what's going on. So a cool thing if you like to go Spire right away, and it's a good time to do it, the Protoss will be interested in scouting it, so that's why he has Phoenix flying around to see what's going on. But you can do some cool tricks, such as generating creep with your overlords and just proxying the Spire somewhere out on the map. So say you have an overlord here, you can drop down some creep, send a drone there, and just build your Spire in a weird spot that'll be basically impossible for them to scout. So here we go, this is what I was talking about. The Protoss is responding with Phoenix, which is what they're supposed to do, but you can just start out with Corruptor and get on top of the Phoenix before they really become a big problem. So if you start out with Corruptor, then you can follow it up with Mutalisks, because you can keep the Mutalisks protected by the Corruptors. It's something we haven't talked about too much, but it is definitely time that we talk about that now. So starting up a lot of Corruptors right now. He is taking extra bases though. This is his 4th, this is his 5th. He's just taking a jillion bases because Protoss has to basically stay in their base for a long time in order to not die to stuff like this. You obviously don't want to throw your Corruptors away, but this is a good buffer point to start adding in a lot of Mutalisks afterward once you get your gas stabilized. So again, he's mining on these 5 bases worth of gas. That's almost 1,200 gas a minute, which equals 12 mutas a minute. And this is going to be more of the same stuff, of just keeping the Protoss in their base for as long as possible, taking opportunity when opportunity prevents itself. We definitely did see a different opener against the Stargate, especially against the Phoenix type of openers, and that is opening up with Corruptors first. What you really want to do with these Corruptors is just buffer between the Phoenix and the Mutas, considering the Phoenix will be able to win and kind of outrange and outmicro the Mutas in the longer stage of the game, but the Corruptors are there because they're bigger, they deal more damage, they have better range, especially since the Phoenix, I think, have 6 or 7 range once they're upgraded. I can't quite remember. But the point here is just to, you can still use your Mutalisks to harass and whatever, but you're going to just use your Corruptors as kind of the meat of your army to fight the Phoenix, so that you can position that properly. We're going to see just a little bit of that, but we're also going to see that if you get these 5 bases up in mining, your attack timings are super strong, and the Protoss has to play basically perfectly to not die to stuff like this. So, going to attack up here. He's almost maxed out right now on Zergling, Corruptor, Muta. There's a lot of Void Rays out right now, and this is the point where you need to start targeting everything properly. The biggest thing is he is getting a big surround on the ground army, and that's really nice. But the targeting you need to do here is that the Mutas need to be targeted on the Void Rays, and the Corruptors need to be targeted on the Phoenix. We talked about this in the micro and compositions video a little bit, but this is where it definitely comes into play. So do your best to kill the Void Rays as fast as you can with the Mutalisks, and do your best to kill the Phoenix as fast as you can with the Corruptors, considering you will optimize your damage that way. So the fight's coming down here. He basically just has a full surround on everything. He's probably not going to win with this timing, but considering he has so much gas income, he can just make as many mutas as he really wants to. The most important thing in this battle is that the Corruptors are still alive, so that the Phoenix can't just bully around the mutas this entire time. You can see if you get a good attack timing, this is already a big supply separation, about 70 supply. So you can still be very aggressive on these types of timings, but opening up with the Corruptors and keeping your Mutalisks protected with the Corruptors is going to be what's really important, especially in longer games, as they start to build up more and more of a Phoenix count. So we didn't really see a very long game with Phoenix involved as far as counting the Mutalisks, but there is a late game ZvP video that you can check out that demonstrates this a little bit more clearly. Of course, there's a lot of other VODs and stuff you can watch that include Mutalisk games against Protoss. Sue, most notably, is one of the better players that does that. So yeah, that's going to be pretty much it for this video. I hope that at least gave you guys some good ideas as far as how to handle these builds, when to use them, what you're supposed to do with them, stuff like that, and the whole philosophy behind it. Basically, if you can get them out and you can get them up stably, just take the whole map, take as many gases as you want, and be prepared to transition into whatever you want, assuming they ever respond to your Mutalisks properly. So, hope you guys enjoyed that. You can post down in the comments if you have any questions. All my other Zerg tutorials are in the comments, or rather in the description, I'm sorry, so check that out. And I'll be back with more videos really soon, so take care and take it easy.